Famous Fortnite pros first versus best tournaments. I'll even throw in their first earnings and where they're at right now, so don't say I'm not good to you. First up is our boy Aqua, and the first tournament he ever played was the Cooler Cup. However, this was a third-party event with only $350 prize pool, so we ain't counting it. First official one that he ended up playing was the Share the Love EU Cup, where he ended up placing 55th overall. Now, it only took 6 days after this for Aqua to win his first tournament, which was the Gauntlet Solos. Looking back at the gameplay, he did so many things well here, like the first, probably earliest peanut butter edit I've ever seen. And of course, there was a ton of high ground dominance from Aqua. Even in the earliest days of his gameplay, the first year that he was ended up playing, he was on top of the lobby as the king of high ground. It shouldn't be a surprise to anyone that Aqua's best tournament was the World Cup Duos in 2019, where he won $3 million split with Nyrox. Despite the fact that this was in 2019, his playstyle all the way up until today is relatively similar. Looking at the FNCS that he won in Chapter 3 Season 2 with Vino, his gameplay was pretty much exactly the same, just evolved a little bit more with some better strategies as the years have gone on. Unfortunately, after this win, Aqua has ended up quitting the game for I don't know how many times, like the 4th or 5th time, because he has some wrist issues, so we unfortunately have not seen him, but he is invited to the FNCS Invitational, so I think we'll see him there with reason. It's honestly just really impressive to me how consistent Aqua's high ground playstyle has been, going all the way back to 2019 and still standing strong. We all know crowd favorite MrSavage has been around for a long time, but his first tournament was actually on the 5th of August 2018, where he played the POG Duo tournament with Ryu and ended up placing 11th. Funnily enough, Solos was very close after that, where he ended up winning this as well. This is actually an elimination race tournament, similar to how most of them were in the very early days of the game. At this time in 2018, pretty much no one could build, but MrSavage was undoubtedly one of the most mechanical players at the time. Interestingly, still true to this date. His first earnings came in the Scallywag Cup, placing 18th with Benjyfishy, and his first in-game tournament win was also with Benjyfishy shortly following that, which was the Gauntlet Duo Finals on the 10th of March 2019. Now, there are a lot of contenders for what MrSavage's best tournament may be, but in my eyes, it's very, very clear. The first place at the DreamHack Anaheim LAN in 2020. MrSavage won this entire tournament in person, and most importantly, won the final game while doing so. MrSavage has been a top solo player since the Elim race days, the LANs, the online cash cups, and even all the way up until today. Very impressive. Most people started to hear about the Polish goat Setty around the middle of Chapter 2, however, he absolutely is an OG of the game. Similar to MrSavage, he was competing back in August of 2018 in the POG solo tournament. It's a shame that I can pretty much find zero footage from Chapter 1 from Setty at all, because he only started uploading in the middle of Chapter 2. However, of course, his best tournament to date was undoubtedly Chapter 2 Season 8 FNCS, where he was crowned champions alongside Cammy and Teak. They finished almost 100 points ahead of second place, with out of the 12 games only placing outside of the top 10 once. This is undoubtedly one of the best, if not the best performance in Fortnite competitive history. Of course, Setty's still a staple in the EU region to this day, but he's still chasing that second FNCS win. The ever so infamous Mitre0. Now, his first tournament was in July of 2018. It was the Summer Skirmish week number 1. Now, I'm not entirely sure where he actually placed here because it's not on any Gamepedia or Fortnite tracker or anything like that, but we can see is in week number 2 he placed 13th, and then he actually got his first tournament win ever in week number 3 with Majin. Now, he switched up his duo from week 1 to week 3 because, I mean, watching back the clips from week 1, his duo at that time was just dead in every single one of them. At this time, Mitre was undoubtedly the best player in the world. Not only did he win that week number 3, he went on to win week number 5 with Kinzel, a different duo. Then in the fall skirmish, he ended up winning 2 of these weeks as well. One solo and another one with yet again a different duo slug. It almost didn't even matter who he was playing with because he would just wipe the floor with the rest of the tournament. He's had minimal success this year competing, but did go to the Gamers 8 tournament where he left pretty much as soon as he could. Everyone's got to start somewhere, and that includes the EU GOAT TaySon. Now, a lot of people may think because you didn't hear about him until early Chapter 2, roughly Chapter 2 Season 2, Chapter 2 Season 3, that he wasn't around earlier than that. But he earned in the World Cup warm-up and 6 of the 10 World Cup qualifiers. Sure, his best placement was 100, so he wasn't really anywhere close to actually qualifying. However, he clearly was around and was a good player at this time. Looking back at this tournament, his aim was actually really, really good, and one of the things I picked up on was that he seemed to understand how to stagger rotations in endgame even as early as 2019. Hey, maybe it wasn't intentional, but it did look like it. With 4 FNCS wins to his name, it's hard to pick a best tournament for TaySon. However, I'm going to go with Chapter 3 Season 3's solo FNCS win. To me, this one was so impressive because all of the rest of the leaderboard was so close, yet he was almost like a game win ahead of everyone else in terms of points. It becomes even more impressive when you realize that he just placed 5th in the solo invitational before that, and then a couple seasons later in the Chapter 2 Season 7 solo All-Stars, he ended up placing 1st again. Clearly, the best solo player in FNCS. He's basically had some of the most impressive FNCS placements generally throughout EU and the world. However, unfortunately, the most recent one was probably his 2nd worst FNCS performance ever, only due to the fact that he was contested off spawn. Interestingly, I would have predicted him to win if he wasn't. While we're talking about some of the best players in EU, how can we not talk about ThomasHD? Now, ThomasHD's been around since the game's basically begun. He went to World Cup, he qualified there, but his first tournament was actually Winter Royale 2018, where he placed 90th overall. Not the best finish ever. Unfortunately, I have no Chapter 1 footage to find of ThomasHD because he hasn't uploaded anything from this time. Not even a How I Qualified to World Cup video. And when looking at what his best tournament was, this was really interesting because ThomasHD has never won a major tournament before. He's placed 3rd 4 times in FCS finals, he's got a 2nd, he's got some 4ths, and in this season he's placed 6th. So not one single major victory, which is so interesting from one of the best players in the region. But in my eyes, the best tournament that he's ever played was Chapter 2 Season 5's semi-finals, or heats. Now, what was so impressive about this is that they won by 105 points over 2nd place. And this wasn't a bad lobby. There was Benjy was in here, the Andelec, some of the biggest names in EU. Now, that's impressive, but look at the match history. 1st with 17 elims, 1st with 13 elims, 2nd with 26 eliminations against some of the best players in the region. This was truly one of the craziest things that I've ever watched. Now, what about our main man, Benjyfishy? Now, he played in the first Winter Royale in 2018 and ended up placing 118th. Now, he was very unfortunate because he couldn't qualify for the finals because at this time it was over 16-year-olds only, and he was, of course, under 16 years old. There was a few tweets about this. Benjy had a lot of really good tournaments, so it was kind of difficult for me to pick the best one. We could say Season X, where they had a complete domination over all of the qualifier weeks and then unfortunately didn't do as well in the finals. But I think to me, the most impressive thing that he's done is the Chapter 2 Season 2 Solo Invitational. He won both of the weekly qualifiers, but not only this, he also won one of the earlier rounds in both of these, 2nd in another and 8th in a 2nd. This solo consistency is actually so unbelievably incredible to me. Of course, he went on not to do that well in finals, but I think this stint in Chapter 2 Season 1 and Chapter 2 Season 2 was when Benjy was just in his prime. Since then, of course, Benjy was a staple of the region up until recently, where he's quit and moved over to Valorant and seems to be doing great in his streaming career there. While talking about Benjy, how can we not talk about Mongraal as well? His first tournament was in July 2018, where he was playing the Bush Paranoia Open Duos Cup. This is a really interesting tournament because it was one that actually had access to live spectator at the time, so there's a bunch of cool footage you can see from the actual tournament itself. These clips only have like a couple hundred views on YouTube as well. His first earnings was with Mitre0, and it was also the first time they won a tournament, which was the Lux Cup on the 31st of March 2019. Of course, he qualified to World Cup, but what was his best tournament in my eyes? I think it's got to be the Chapter 2 Season 4 FNCS win with TaySon and Mitr0. There are some absolutely hilarious clips of Mitr0 and Mongraal just not listening to TaySon's IGLing this season.
You want to impulse in? You want to impulse in?
No, straight.
He's fizzing!
On me.
TaySon, chill, don't die.